The human mechanic who was sent far, far away. Jack Miller was just a normal guy. He fixed machines. He worked at a repair station near the edge of Earth's orbit. Every day, he wore a gray uniform, held a wrench, and made robots move again. Nothing special ever happened to Jack. He was just good with machines, and that was enough. One day, a message came through his station's comms. It was from a company called Xeron Galaxy Corp. Jack had never heard of it. The message was simple. You are selected for a high-priority mechanic role in Zone 9 of the Andros star system. Full payment in advance. No experience with aliens required. Just operate the machines. Jack laughed at first. Zone 9. Andros star system. Sounds like a scam. But then, the money showed up. 10 million credits. All in his account. Real. Verified. His mouth dropped open. He didn't even read the full contract. He just pressed accept. 2 days later, a ship came for him. A smooth silver transport with no windows and no pilot. A voice told him to step inside. Prepare for cryo sleep, the voice said. Jack felt a cold mist enter his body. His eyes closed. Everything turned dark. When he woke up, it was quiet. He opened his eyes slowly. There was no Earth. No stars. Just a blue sky above him and soft grass under his back. What the hell? He whispered. Jack stood up. He was in a strange field, surrounded by glowing plants. The air smelled like flowers. Giant trees moved like they were breathing. And there were no humans anywhere. Then he saw them. Across the hill, walking toward him, were figures. Tall, graceful, and glowing slightly under the sunlight. They were women, but not human. Their skin was soft shades of silver and lavender. Their eyes were large, shimmering like water. Their hair floated as if underwater. Jack blinked. They didn't stop walking. They came closer. All of them stared straight at him. He tried to speak. Hi. None of them replied. But then one of them stepped forward. She had bright blue eyes and soft silver hair. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. She spoke slowly. Her voice was music. You are the one. Jack looked behind him. Who, me? She nodded. The prophecy. It's true. The human male has arrived. Jack laughed nervously. No. I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just here to operate machines. The others began to kneel around him. The woman reached out and touched his shoulder. He speaks our tongue. Without training. It has begun. Jack backed away. Wait. What has begun? What's going on? More women arrived, at least 20, then 30, then 100. All of them had the same look in their eyes. Hope, fear, awe. Jack whispered, Okay, something is seriously not right. Then a loud horn echoed across the sky. A ship appeared above them, golden and shaped like a leaf. It landed slowly in the center of the field. From it stepped a woman taller than all the others. She wore golden armor and had a glowing symbol on her forehead. Everyone around Jack bowed their heads. She did not. She walked straight up to him and stared. Human, she said. Welcome to Eltheria. Jack cleared his throat. Yeah, hi. I think there's been a mistake. I'm just supposed to fix some mining bots. She looked deep into his eyes. You will not fix machines, she said. You will fix us. Jack blinked. I think I'd want to go home now. The queen turned to her guards and said, Take him to the temple. As Jack was led away, hundreds of alien eyes followed him. Whispers filled the air. He's the one. He came from the stars. He doesn't know who he is. And as Jack was taken through golden gates into a world he didn't understand, one last thought crossed his mind. What have I gotten myself into? The prophecy of the only male. Jack sat inside a tall crystal room. He didn't know what to say or what to think. The walls around him glowed gently, like moonlight. Strange symbols floated across the air, written in a language he had never learned. Yet somehow his eyes could read them. The one will come from the blue planet. He will not know his power. He will be surrounded by 100 daughters of Eltheria. He looked up. There were no windows, no doors. Only 2 tall alien guards stood silently near the walls. They wore white armor and long spears that sparkled like lightning. Their silver eyes never blinked. Jack felt like a prisoner, but the room was beautiful. He rubbed his face. This has to be a dream. Just hours ago, he was a mechanic in space, fixing broken robots and eating protein bars. Now he was sitting in a glowing alien temple, surrounded by women who believed he was part of an ancient prophecy. He stood up and paced the floor. That's when the door finally opened. The woman from earlier, the one with blue eyes and silver hair, stepped in again. She wore a soft white robe now, with a glowing circle at her chest. She looked nervous, but calm. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I speak for the High Queen." Jack tried to smile. "Nice to meet you, Lyra. I'm Jack. I fix machines, not destinies." Lyra tilted her head. "You do not believe." Jack laughed. "Believe what? That I flew across galaxies just to be part of some alien legend." She didn't laugh with him. Instead, she held out a small golden sphere. When she tapped it, a 3D image floated above it. Jack leaned closer. It showed a drawing, old, cracked, like something from a scroll. In the picture was a man, with brown hair, 2 eyes, 2 arms. He looked just like Jack. "Thousands of years ago," Lyra explained, "our male population vanished. A sickness from the stars took them. Only the females survived." Jack frowned. "A virus." Lyra nodded. "We tried everything, but no male could be born. Our race was dying, until the stars gave us hope." She tapped the sphere again. Now, the image showed Earth. Our seers spoke of a world covered in blue water, a place where males and females still lived in balance. A male from that world would come. He would awaken the machines of origin. He would unite the sisterhoods. And she paused. Jack raised an eyebrow. And he would choose, Lyra said softly. He would choose among the 100. The 100 what? Lyra didn't answer. She looked away. Before Jack could press further, another voice spoke. It was deeper, colder. "Enough, Lyra." The High Queen stepped inside. She was taller than Lyra. Her skin was glowing gold. Her hair was like waves of fire, flowing behind her without wind. A glowing crown floated above her head. Everyone in the room, including Lyra, immediately bowed. Jack stayed standing. "You must be the queen." "I am Queen Aurelius," she said, stepping forward. "Leader of Eltheria, daughter of flame, mother of the last bloodline." Jack shrugged. "Nice title." "I'm Jack, guy from Earth." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You are more than you think." Jack crossed his arms. "Everyone keeps saying that." The queen raised a hand. A screen opened in the air, showing security footage. Jack touching the strange alien console earlier, and the machine lighting up under his hand. "That machine was dead for 600 years, she said. "No Eltherian has ever awakened it. Until you." Jack looked at the screen. "Okay." I touched a screen. "So what?" Lyra stepped closer. "The machines of origin are ancient. We believe they were made by your kind, long ago." Jack's jaw tightened. "You're saying humans were here before?" The queen nodded. "We do not know, but the machines respond to your DNA." Silence filled the room. Jack's heart began to pound. He had come to fix broken bots. That was it. But now, he was part of something bigger, something strange, something dangerous. "What do you want from me?" he asked slowly. Queen Aurelius stepped forward. "You will stay. You will learn. You will be tested. And when the time is right, you will choose your path. Jack frowned. What if I say no? The Queen smiled. 100,000 years of waiting will not end in no, Jack Miller. She turned and walked away, her cloak floating behind her like smoke. The door closed again. Jack sat down, feeling his whole world flip upside down. Lyra sat beside him. You don't have to be afraid, she whispered. Not all of us believe in forcing fate. He looked into her eyes. I just wanted to fix machines, he whispered back. She smiled gently. Maybe you still will. But neither of them noticed the shadow moving behind the crystal wall. A figure was watching them, eyes glowing red, and it did not want Jack to succeed. The Queen's test. The next morning, Jack woke up in a round room with floating lights above his head. The bed was soft, but it didn't feel like home. He sat up and looked around. Everything in this place felt too perfect, too quiet. His clothes were gone. Instead, someone had left him a strange robe made of thin, glowing threads. It felt light as air and stuck to his skin like silk. He didn't like it, but he had no choice. As soon as he stood, the door slid open without sound. 2 guards waited outside. Their faces were hard. No smiles. No words. Where are we going now? Jack asked. Neither of them answered. He sighed. Of course. They led him through tall silver halls, through a garden where glowing birds flew, and past a wall covered in carvings. Each carving showed a human-like figure with energy bursting from his hands. Jack stared at it. It looked just like him again. Finally, the guard stopped at a massive door. It had no handle, only a glowing circle in the center. One guard raised her palm. The circle turned green, and the door opened. Inside was darkness, and a voice. Enter, human. Jack took a deep breath and stepped in. The door closed behind him. The room inside was cold and black. No lights. No windows. Suddenly, torches burst into flame. Blue fire. He was standing in a stone chamber now, with a round platform in the middle. All around him were tall seats, like judges in a courtroom. Each one was filled by a different alien woman, dressed in different robes and colors. The Queen sat at the highest point, above everyone else. Her eyes glowed like gold. Lyra was there too, but she stood at the edge, nervous, like she didn't want to watch. The Queen stood. Today, we begin the trial of the human. You will face 3 tests. Jack frowned. Tests. For what? To see who you truly are. He crossed his arms. And if I fail? Then we erase all memory of this place and send you back to Earth. That got his attention. Begin the first test. A new voice came from the wall. The floor in front of Jack opened up, and a robot rose from the ground. But it wasn't a normal robot. This one was huge, 10 feet tall, shaped like a lion made of crystal and metal. Fight, said the voice. Jack laughed nervously. Fight that. With what? I don't have any weapons. The lion charged. Jack jumped to the side and ran. The alien women watched silently. He rolled, ducked, and dodged, but the lion was fast. Then, Jack saw something. A panel on the wall behind the creature. Glowing. Blinking. He ran for it. The lion lunged. Jack slid under its legs and smacked the panel. Suddenly, the lion stopped moving. Everyone gasped. The Queen's voice echoed. He did not fight. He thought. A rare skill. Jack stood, sweating. I'm not a warrior. I fix things. The Queen smiled slightly. On to the second test. The lights dimmed again. A hologram appeared in front of Jack. It showed Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was broken. On fire. People screaming. Jack stepped forward. Choose one, the voice said. 3 doors appeared in the air. One said, save 1 life. The second said, save 10 lives. The third said, save the planet. Jack looked at all 3. His voice was quiet. This is a trick. You may only choose one. Jack closed his eyes. He pointed to the first door. Everyone gasped again. You choose one life overall. Jack nodded. If I only save one life, maybe that person saves the others. The doors vanished. The Queen leaned forward. Interesting. Finally, the third test. The lights went completely out. Jack was now standing in total darkness. Then, slowly, the sound of crying filled the space. Soft. Sad. A voice whispered in his ear, "You are alone. Forgotten. Unloved. You will die here." Another voice, "You were never chosen. You were just a mistake." Another, "No one is coming for you." Jack dropped to his knees. He grabbed his head. The voices got louder. Angry. Mean. He tried to cover his ears, but the sound came from inside his head. Memories of loneliness, failure, rejection, heartbreak, all came back at once. His voice cracked. "Stop, please." Then one sound broke through the chaos. A soft whisper. Lyra's voice. "You are not alone, Jack. I'm here." He opened his eyes. The room was quiet again. Light returned. He stood, shaking. The Queen rose. The final test was the hardest. The test of the soul. You passed. Jack fell to the floor, exhausted. Later that night, he sat alone with Lyra in a quiet garden. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," Jack said. "That last one. It felt real." Lyra nodded. It was. The test doesn't show lies. Only what you hide inside. Jack looked up at the sky. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Lyra smiled. "Because I think you're more than a prophecy." He looked into her eyes. "What if I don't want to be anyone's hero?" "Then just be someone's friend," she whispered. They sat in silence. But far away in the Queen's private chamber, another figure stepped into the shadows. Her voice was dark. "He's too strong. We must stop him before he changes everything." Escape from the royal lab. Jack couldn't sleep that night. Not after the tests. Not after what he saw. Not after the voices in his head whispered all the fears he had buried for years. He lay awake in a soft alien bed, staring at the ceiling made of crystal vines and gentle blue light. Somewhere far in the palace, music was playing, soft and strange. The wind carried the scent of glowing flowers and warm air. Everything was peaceful. But inside Jack's chest, his heart beat like a drum. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't know what was real anymore. The Queen said he passed. Lyra said she believed in him. The aliens treated him like some kind of chosen one. But deep inside, he still felt like a mechanic in the wrong galaxy. Suddenly, his door opened without a sound. Jack sat up fast. "Lyra." No answer. Only a figure in a dark hood stepped in. Jack jumped to his feet. But the figure raised both hands. "Sha, I'm here to help." The voice was familiar. The hood came down. It was Lyra. But she looked different now. Her hair was tied up, and her soft white robe was gone. She wore a tight black suit made of strange material, and her eyes were filled with urgency. "Get dressed," she whispered. "We don't have much time." They ran through the halls silently. Jack's heart raced. "Where are we going?" Lyra didn't stop running. "I'm taking you to the place they don't want you to see." "The Queen." Lyra nodded. "She says you passed the tests, but what she really wants is to control you." Jack followed, dodging cameras and silent drones flying above. They reached a steel door deep underground. Lyra pulled a glowing stone from her belt and pressed it into a small hole. The door slid open. Cold air hit Jack's face. The room beyond was dark and full of machines. Jack stepped into the chamber. It was massive, hidden below the palace. Glowing tubes stretched from floor to ceiling. Robots floated in glass tanks, ancient machines, dead machines, and human technology. Jack recognized some of it instantly. His jaw dropped. "These are Earth machines," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "That's what they didn't tell you. This place was built by humans. A long time ago." Jack stepped toward a metal table. On it was a small cube. He picked it up. It buzzed to life in his hand. Holograms burst into the air. Videos of old Earth scientists speaking English. "Project Starseed," one of the recordings said. "We've successfully made contact with the Eltharian people. Phase 3 begins. Earth colony status. In progress." Jack's eyes widened. "Wait. Earth was trying to colonize this place." Lyra nodded. "Long ago, before even our records began." "But what happened to them?" Jack asked. Lyra walked to a sealed tank. Inside was something horrible, a skeleton of a human in a white lab coat, still wearing an Earth badge. He had died sitting in a console. Lyra's voice was quiet. "They were betrayed." Jack stared. "What if I'm not the first human here?" he whispered. "What if I'm just the first survivor?" The machines in the lab began to power up. Without touching anything, Jack walked near a console, and it lit up. The room responded to his presence. Lyra looked amazed. "It listens to you." Jack placed his hand on the console. A map appeared. It showed the planet, Eltharia, its energy lines, its power sources. Then it zoomed out to show connections to other systems. A red light blinked. Jack tapped it. A soft warning appeared on screen. "Varied core active. Countdown engaged." Jack backed away. "What does that mean?" Lyra's face turned pale. "Something underground, something big, is waking up." Suddenly, the alarm rang. Red lights flashed. Doors slammed shut. The Queen's voice echoed through the speakers. "You were warned not to stray." Guards flooded into the hallway. Lyra pulled Jack's arm. "Run." They sprinted out the back exit. A secret tunnel led through the rocks, deep into a cave. Outside, they gasped for breath. But Jack could still hear the Queen's voice in his head. "You found the truth, Jack Miller. But truth has a price." They hid in the caves for hours. Lyra sat beside Jack, shivering. "You were never just a worker," she said. "They knew who you were before you arrived." Jack looked at her. "Then why bring me here?" "Because they believe your DNA holds the key to awakening the buried machines. They want to use you." Jack stood up. "I don't want to be used." "Then become something more," Lyra said softly. "Not a mechanic, not a prophecy, just a man who chooses his own fate." As they moved deeper into the cave, Jack saw something ahead. A glowing light. A door made of pure energy. It responded to his touch and opened. Inside, the walls were made of mirrors, but each mirror showed a different version of himself. One was wearing armor. One was a leader. One was holding Lyra's hand. "What is this place?" he whispered. Lyra stepped beside him. "The machine of choices. You decide who you become now, Jack." He looked around, then at her, and slowly he whispered, "I'm ready to fight back." Far away, in the palace, the Queen stood in front of her war generals. "Activate the sky blades," she ordered. "We go to war." Her eyes glowed like fire. "If the human will not serve us, he must be destroyed." The war of the sisterhoods. The wind howled through the canyons of Eltharia. Dust spun like dancing spirits in the air. Jack stood at the mouth of the glowing cave, his hands trembling, his heart pounding. Behind him, the energy door of the machine of choices was now sealed shut. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel chosen. He just felt angry. Angry at being used. Angry that someone had played with his life. Angry that 100 alien women, some full of hope, others full of fear, had been forced to believe in a myth they barely understood. And now, the Queen wanted war. Lyra stood beside him in silence. She wore a dark travel cloak now, her silver hair tied back, a small handheld scanner in her fingers. She had been quiet since they left the inner chamber. Finally, she spoke. "The sisterhoods will break." Jack turned to her. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, serious. "There are over 100 clans across Eltheria, each ruled by a matron. The queen speaks for all of them, but many do not follow her heart." Jack crossed his arms. "How many will follow me?" Lyra looked down. "That depends on whether they believe in the prophecy." He shook his head. "I'm not a prophecy." "No," she said gently. "You're something scarier. You're real." As night fell, a ship arrived in secret. It was sleek, black, and silent, sent by Matron Tyla of the Verdant Sisterhood, a rebel leader who had broken away from Queen Aurelius months ago. She had heard whispers of the human, and now she wanted to meet him. Jack and Lyra boarded the craft and flew low over the glowing forests of Eltheria. Below, creatures moved in silver rivers. Birds with neon wings glided across purple skies. But far in the distance, something dark rose. Smoke. Black clouds coming from the Queen's capital. "She's already moving her army," Lyra whispered. "She's preparing to strike." When they landed at the Verdant base, Jack was stunned. It wasn't a base. It was a village built into the trees, glowing softly with life. Women of all shapes and colors walked calmly between huts and bridges. They wore no armor, no weapons. Only one figure stood out, Matron Tyla. She was older than the others, her face marked with glowing tribal lines, her hair long and braided with beads. She stepped forward. "So," she said, "this is the human who broke the temple seals." Jack nodded. "I guess so." She looked him up and down. "You don't look powerful." Jack smiled. "I'm not." She stared for a long time. Then finally she nodded. "Good. Real power doesn't need to show itself." That night, Jack spoke to the sisterhood. He stood before dozens of alien women, some with doubt, others with awe. "I didn't ask for this," he began. "I didn't come here to lead or to fight. I came here to fix machines. But now, I see what's really broken." He paused. "It's not your cities. It's not your systems. It's your hope. You've waited too long for a savior. You've waited too long for someone else to make a choice. Well, I'm here, and I'm making mine. I won't be your king. I won't be your god, but I'll stand with you. I'll fight beside you, and I'll protect those who still believe in something better." There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole sisterhood stood and raised their hands. Lyra whispered beside him, smiling, "You just lit a fire." But far away, in the Queen's command ship, cold plans were being made. Dozens of sky blades, flying warships shaped like sharp feathers, hovered above the palace. Queen Aurelius stood at a massive map of Eltheria. "They've joined the human," she said quietly. "Let them. When I cut off the head, the body will fall." She raised a long blade made of glowing blue steel. "Send the assassins." Back in the Verdant camp, peace didn't last long. The attack came just before dawn. 3 shadowy figures dropped from the sky, wearing cloaking tech and blades made of humming energy. They moved like wind. The first tried to stab Jack in his sleep, but Lyra stopped her, using a pulse weapon to knock the assassin back. The second leaped at Matron Tyla, but was caught in a glowing net trap. The third almost reached the heart of the village. Almost. Until Jack stepped forward, holding nothing but a tool from the ancient lab. He pressed it. The air shimmered, and a defensive shield activated across the camp. A leftover gift from Earth's lost tech. The assassin slammed into it and fell, unconscious. The camp was safe. For now. Later, Tyla sat with Jack beside a fire. "You are not a weapon," she said, "but you are a symbol. They will come again. In greater numbers." Jack nodded. "Then we need more than defense. We need to wake the machines." Lyra looked up. The machines of origin. Yes, Jack said. They listened to me before. Maybe they will again. Tyla frowned. Many believe they are cursed. Jack stood. Then it's time to break the curse. That night, in the dark, hidden valley below the verdant forest, Jack, Lyra, and Tyla stood before a massive sealed gate. It pulsed with red light. Jack reached out. The gate whispered in ancient Earth code. DNA match confirmed. The doors opened. Inside, rows and rows of Earth-born war machines waited. Rusty. Asleep. But not dead. Jack turned to them. Let's wake up, old friends. Far above, in the Queen's ship, a messenger ran to her throne. Your Majesty, we've lost contact with Outposts 7, and 8, and 9. The Queen stood slowly. The sky behind her cracked with lightning. So, the human wants war. Then I'll give him one. The human heart breaks the code. The machine of origin hummed beneath the valley like a sleeping giant. Its hull stretched for miles beneath the ground, built of smooth metal and glowing veins of energy. It was Earth technology. Jack knew that now. Built long before he was born. Maybe even before Earth knew it had made contact with Eltheria at all. Jack walked slowly through the tunnel, torchlight flickering on his face. Beside him were Lyra and Matron Tyla. Behind them followed a group of loyal verdant warriors. The deeper they went, the more Earth-like everything became. Angled doorways, English warning signs, old lights blinking from long-dead panels. It felt less like a temple, and more like home. Lyra ran her hand along the wall. These machines haven't moved in centuries. They should be dead. Jack didn't answer. He was staring ahead. At the center of the chamber stood a massive structure, a core shaped like a spinning cube inside a floating ring, glowing faint blue. On the ground beneath it, old human skeletons lay, wearing tattered uniforms. He stepped forward. One nameplate still shined. Dr. Jonas Miller. Jack froze. His heart dropped. That's my last name, he whispered. Lyra looked at him. A relative. I don't know. Jack fell to his knees beside the bones. I never knew my father. Or grandfather. My mom said they worked on something big, something secret. Matron Tyla looked solemn. Perhaps you were always meant to return here. Jack stared at the console in front of the core. He reached out, and as his fingers touched the surface, the entire room came alive. Lights blinked on. Screens lit up. Mechanical arms moved. One screen displayed the message. Welcome back, Miller Line. Access level. Prime. The ground rumbled softly. Machines rose from the floor. Earth-made exosuits, drones, floating tanks, each one blinking green. Lyra gasped. They work. Jack turned slowly. They're waiting for orders. He looked around. Let's give them a reason to fight. That night, Jack sat alone in a quiet side chamber, surrounded by soft blue lights and humming machines. He was holding the small Earth cube he had taken from the lab before. He had never really looked at it, until now. He turned it over in his palm and whispered, "Show me what I need to see." The cube flickered, then played an old video. An older man appeared, wrinkled, bearded, wearing a white coat. His voice was soft, shaky. If you're watching this, then you're my descendant, and you found what we failed to protect. Jack leaned closer. We tried to make peace. We gave Eltheria our best technology. We helped them grow. But something changed. The Queen wanted more. Control over reproduction, over power, over prophecy. When we resisted, she erased us. But we left one path open, one chance, and that chance is you. The screen blinked off. Jack's hands were shaking. My own family built this place, and died for it, he whispered. Lyra stepped into the room. She saw his face, the tears in his eyes, the cube in his hand. Jack, what did you see? He turned to her slowly. My grandfather was the last engineer here. He built the machines of origin. He trusted the Queen, and she killed them all. Lyra sat beside him, gently resting a hand on his. What will you do now? Jack looked up at the glowing core. I'll finish what he started. The next morning, Jack gathered the sisterhoods. Not just the Verdant, but others who had joined. More rebel clans had come, hearing rumors of the human awakening the ancient tech. The Queen's army was still marching. They had little time. Jack stood before a crowd of over 1,000 alien women, warriors, leaders, and young dreamers. He wore Earth armor now, old but working. A drone hovered behind him, showing holograms of the Queen's forces. She wants to divide you, Jack said. She wants to rule you. But what if we stop waiting for prophecy and just start fighting for freedom? The crowd roared. But if we're going to stand a chance, he continued, we need more than swords. We need our minds, our hearts, our machines. He raised his hand, and the machines of origin behind him powered up. Floating drones, walkerbots, defense towers, all glowing and ready. Let's show the Queen, Jack said, what one human and 100 warriors can do together. Later, Lyra found Jack alone again, this time outside, near the edge of the camp. You're changing, she said. Jack chuckled. Yeah, I don't fix things anymore. I lead. That's not what I meant. He looked at her. You're opening up, she said. You're not running. You're becoming. He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, I was never meant to be a leader. But now, I don't want to run. She touched his face. Then don't. They leaned close, and for the first time since he arrived in Eltheria, Jack kissed her. But far across the sky, in the Queen's dark war chamber, a general spoke urgently. The machines have awakened. The Queen stood in silence. Then she raised a finger. Begin the attack. The center of their universe. The sky over Eltheria turned black with war. Queen Auralis's sky blades filled the clouds like steel birds, sharp, fast, deadly. Their wings shimmered with dark energy. Beneath them marched legions of elite warriors in silver armor, each armed with plasma spears and lightning shields. The war had begun, and at the center of it all stood Jack. He wasn't wearing royal robes, no golden crown, no glowing mark of prophecy. Just a simple, restored Earth exosuit and a steel heart full of choice. He stood on a ridge above the valley of the machines of origin. All around him were the sisterhoods of Eltheria, now united, not by prophecy, but by a man who had earned their trust, not demanded it. Jack raised his voice. This isn't about destiny anymore. This is about freedom, about truth, about choosing your future. Let's show the Queen what happens when we stop waiting for saviors and start fighting for each other. 1,000 voices screamed back in agreement. The human had become more than a mechanic. He had become a spark. The battle began at dawn. The Queen's forces charged from the east, lines of sleek hover tanks and storm soldiers in rows. But Jack had planned this. Lyra, he said calmly into his comms. Phase 1. From behind the ridge, the machines of origin activated. Drones shot into the air, intercepting sky blades. Tower cannons burst from the ground and fired bursts of light, cutting the Queen's army in half. The sisterhoods, guided by Jack's tactics, used guerrilla strikes, disappearing into trees, striking fast, moving like ghosts. It wasn't prophecy. It was strategy, and it worked. But then came the Queen herself. She arrived not in a ship, but on foot, wearing a terrifying set of black armor powered by stolen Earth tech. Her crown now glowed red, her blade burned with unstable energy. I will erase the past, she shouted, and rebuild Eltheria as it was meant to be. She charged into battle, her blade cutting through defense bots. Jack met her in the center of the valley. Just a man with a wrench and a purpose. Their fight was brutal. Blade against shield, Machine against will. "You don't belong here," she screamed. Jack caught her strike with a parry and growled back, "You're right, but neither do your lies." He activated the neural control link, his mind connected to the machines of origin directly. 1,000 bots turned toward the Queen at once. She staggered. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I do," Jack said. "I'm giving this world a choice." But in the chaos, a stray skyblade fired at the Sisterhood's medical tent. The blast struck near it, sending debris flying. One sharp piece cut through the air, straight toward Lyra. She didn't see it coming. Jack turned, and everything slowed. The machines of origin reacted to his fear, his heart, his need. A drone flew faster than light. It blocked the blade, but exploded in the process. Jack ran to her. She was alive, bruised, bleeding, but alive. He held her in his arms. "I'm not leaving you," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "You better not." Back on the battlefield, the Queen stood surrounded. Her forces were breaking. Her machines were crashing. She raised her sword for one final scream. But a pulse cannon from one of Jack's reactivated tanks hit her square in the chest. Her armor shattered. She fell to her knees. Jack walked toward her. "I could kill you," he said. She looked up, coughing. "Then do it." Jack stared down at her and shook his head. "No." He turned to the crowd watching. She wanted to rule through fear. Let's end it with mercy. The Sisterhoods lowered their weapons, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Altheria was quiet. In the days that followed, peace returned. The Sisterhoods formed a new council, made of voices from every clan. Jack refused the title of ruler. He didn't want a throne. He became the ambassador of Earth, helping the Altherians rebuild not as worshippers, but as partners. The machines of origin were deactivated, their weapons sealed away. But their wisdom, their engineering, shared freely. Altheria began to heal. One night, under the soft stars of the rebuilt capital, Jack stood with Lyra at the balcony of the council hall. She held his hand. "Do you still think you're just a mechanic?" she asked. He smiled. "No, I'm a mechanic, a fighter, a leader, a friend." He looked at her. "A lover." She leaned in and whispered, "And the center of our universe." Later, as children played in the glowing grass, stories began to spread. Of the human man who came not to conquer, but to understand. Who didn't rule with power, but with empathy. And who reminded a broken world that sometimes the one who fixes machines can also fix hearts.